In Shri Mahabharatam, the original version of Mahabharatam as compiled by Vyasacharya, apart from the main storyline that is there are certain things which maybe not all of us are aware of it, or rather we can consider that there were some smaller aspects that were there in this text. Like for example, we know Ramayana Mahabharatam are two major itihasas, and in this text of Mahabharatam we had made the Kuru Yuddham that is there, and that's when we have the Gita Upadesham, we have the Vishnu Sahasranama, Sanatsujatiyam, Yaksha Prashnam, Shiva Sahasranama, Viduraniti, so many other gems that are there. And in fact, Mahabharatam, it has been retold so many times, and there have been certain changes here and there, or maybe there were some differences that came in. Now, why so? For that, one reason can be in those times things were not recorded on paper, right? Or we didn't have those audio recorders or something like that. Whatever is passed down through mouth, that is what is there. Even today, also, if I'm speaking to you something, and say I'm not recording anything, I'm not writing it down, or you are not writing it down, if you're just simply listening, there can be some gap, right? Maybe I make a sentence, you can understand it some other way, or you might tend to forget, and so on. So if a third person asks you, what did you listen, what did you understand, you might miss out one, two things, or you might have interpreted in some other manner, right? So these things happen. So same thing happened in those times also. Like when things are passed down through the way of mouth, that is it, that's when little differences come in, like communication differences and so on. So though the essence, the main essence of Mahabharata has remained accurate, there have been certain small differences here and there. But still, there are few facts that are there which are not much known. Like for example, Mahabharatam was initially known as Jayam or Jayaha, right? And we know the evolution of the name from Jayaha, Vijayaha, Bharatam, and finally it is Mahabharatam. Now the first version, wherein the epic was called as Jayaha, it had roughly about 25,000 shlokas or so. While the final version of Mahabharatam that we have has about, you can say, 1 lakh plus shlokas, right? So Jayaha that is there, it mainly focused upon victory, spiritual victory, right? That is, this Yuddham itself is for establishing Dharma back again. So Jayam, the original version or the first version of Mahabharatam, talked only about that victory. Vijayam that is there, it talked about material victory also. That is, the Pandavas won over the kingdom and so on. Next is Bharatam. Bharatam talked about the various family dynasties or the family clan that was there. Now you see, Mahabharata Yuddham had so many things in it that obviously there are going to be so many people also, right? So Bharatam describes about all that, and Mahabharatam, it talks about the wisdom of Bharatavarsha. So combining all these aspects together about the Yuddham, about the victory and so on, it talks about the wisdom of Bharatavarsha, who are the various kings who came in, including the Yadava Kulam, Krishna Parampara, then the Soma Vamsham, the Vamshas of the Pandavas, the previous generations of the Pandavas, the next generation, that is Parikshit and so on. So all these things also are included in Mahabharatam. That is the current version that we have. And also the various gems like Gita, Vishnu Sahasranama and so on, they all were also made a part of this epic, right? So in this way it is said that Mahabharatam, the current version that we look at starting from Jayaha till Mahabharatam, there have been, the subject matter differs a bit. Now when I say differ a bit, it doesn't mean that the story changes altogether, but few additions have been made, right? So it's not that only the name has changed, the subject matter also has differed a bit. Then another lesser known aspect of Mahabharatam is Sahadeva, the youngest of the Pandavas. It is said that though we don't know much, we know about Yudhishthira, Arjuna, Bhima and so on, Nakula, Sahadeva were also, they also had a very, very important role to play in Mahabharatam. In fact, Sahadeva, the younger brother of the Pandavas, he had a power, it seems, that he could see what will happen in future. But it is said that he also knew about various things, but he chose to remain silent because he had been given a curse that if he reveals anything or he predicts anything that will happen in future, then he will have to face death, it seems. So that's the reason he chooses to remain silent. In fact, in some versions of the Mahabharata, it is said that once Pandu dies, the power that is there has come to Sahadeva, this prediction of future that has come maybe from the brains or the flesh of Pandu and so on. Like this also some things have been made. In fact, it is said that Sahadeva was a great astrologer also. Yeah. And this thing, like there came a time it seems that Sahadeva wanted to tell everything to his family, the Pandavas and so on, what will happen. But still, Lord Krishna at that time comes there and tells Sahadeva that you should not disclose anything. In fact, Sahadeva, Bhagavan tells Sahadeva that if someone asks you any questions, you respond to them by asking more questions. That is, why Bhagavan tells this is, when things have to happen, when some certain karmas people have to face, they have to go through that, right? If Sahadeva, though he knew everything, if he revealed ending up, people will not act accordingly. So therefore, Bhagavan tells that whatever karma comes in, people have to face. So do not reveal anything. Let people also go through, let people, the Pandavas and so on, let them also put in efforts. So, though Sahadeva knew everything, he could not reveal anything. That was one aspect of Mahabharatam. Next is, when we talk about Duryodhana, initially Duryodhana or the entire Kaurava clan, all the brothers and one sister, Tushchala and so on, it is said that they were initially named as Sushasana, Suyodhana, Suchala and so on. But because of their negative qualities that they had, they ended up getting the word Du. So Su is something positive, Du is something negative, right? In fact, Suyodhana actually means one who is interested in Gadha Yuddham. So Dhritarashtra, while Duryodhana was born, he feels that his son is very much interested in Gadha Yuddham. He will become a great mace fighter. That's how later Duryodhana and Bhima, they have a fight in Gadha Yuddham. So that's how he names his son as Suyodhana. But because of the negative behavior of Duryodhana, he ends up getting the name. Not only Duryodhana, the entire Kaurava Vamsham, Duryodhana, Dushchala, Dushasana and so on, they all end up getting the names this way. In fact, in another version it is also said that Duryodhana, this name also was given by Balarama, meaning, another meaning to it is a warrior who cannot be defeated at all. Now Balarama, the elder brother of Krishna, is actually the guru of Duryodhana in mace fighting, in Gadha Yuddham. And that is, after learning from Dronacharya, Duryodhana approaches Balarama to learn this art of mace fighting. So that's how even Balarama also, in recognition of his good strength in fighting with the mace, he gives him this title. Next, one more aspect, that this aspect everyone knows, is Vedavyasa, who is a compiler or the composer of Mahabharatam. We know Bhagavan Ganesha writes this down, Vedavyasa conveys. Now, like we all know, Vedavyasa or Vyasa is not actually a name for anyone. It is a title which is given for someone who knows a lot about Vedas also, or mainly he has got the capacity of compiling things together. Now, the knowledge of the Mahabharatam that is there, or the knowledge of the Vedas, they were not written or they were not composed, right, by Vyasacharya. Vyasacharya has done the work of compiling, maybe dividing the Vedas that are there, Rik, Yajur, Sama, and later we have Atharva that gets added in, or even the Mahabharata, when it is divided into certain chapters, certain sections and so on, that has been done by Vyasacharya. So that's how this Vyasa, it is not the name of a person, it is the name of a Padavi that is there. In fact, Krishnadvaipayana Vyasa, because he was born in the island of Krishnadvaipayanam, that's how in Dvaipayanam, one was Dvipam, one was born in an island. Krishna is because he was a bit dark in color, that dark in complexion, that's how he gets this name. Traditionally, that's how it is told. Now, before Krishnadvaipayana Vyasa, who is known to have composed Mahabharatam, we had about 27 Veda Vyasas, it seems. 28th is Krishnadvaipayana Vyasa, because he had a color, Krishna, dark in complexion. He was also born on an island, and that's how he gets the name Krishnadvaipayana. Now, next aspect is, now though we look at the Kauravas that they were against the Pandavas also, it seems that not all the Kauravas were that way, because two of the Kauravas, Vikarna and Yuyutsu most of us might be familiar, they did not approve the actions of Duryodhana basically, and they all actually, when the Draupadi Vastraharanam took place, they had actually protested. In fact, Vikarna is the third son, he is the third Kaurava, and in fact, though he fought on the side of Duryodhana only, he was a great warrior. In fact, Bhishmacharya also calls him as one of the great warriors from the Kaurava side. Now, Yuyutsa was the son of Dhritarashtra, who was not born of Gandhari. He was born out of a lady called Sauvali. Now, who is the Sauvali? Is actually the maid servant, it seems, of Gandhari. So, Dhritarashtra had a relation with her, and that's how the son Yuyutsu was born. So, he was basically like a cousin also to the Pandavas, and that's how his quality also was different. In fact, before the start of the Yuddham only, Yuyutsu changes his side from the Kauravas to the Pandavas, and in fact, he was ultimately the only Kaurava who survived the Dharma Yuddham. Further, when we talk about Vidura, the last brother or a half brother of both the kings Dhritarashtra and Pandu, he was born to Vyasa and a Dasi, in fact, a queen who was serving or who was with the queens Ambika and Ambalika. She was called a Shudri. And in some interpretations, some versions of the Mahabharata, he is also referred to as an avatara of Yamaraja because of his deep knowledge of the Dharma Shastras, Artha Shastram, and so on. In fact, it is said that he was born as a human being because of a curse which was given to him by a sage called Mandavya. So that's how we have Vidura Niti that becomes a part of Mahabharatam because of the extensive knowledge of Vidura. Next is Abhimanyu. Now, Abhimanyu was there. In fact, it is said that Abhimanyu had, though he was born as a human being, he had the Atma which was there inside, that was actually of a demon, it seems. That's how we, in later times, we have Krishna who defeats a demon god, and that demon is Kalayavana. Now, who is this Kalayavana? In fact, this Kalayavana was a demon who was burned to death by Bhagavan and then taken to Dwarakapuri only. In fact, it is said that, very interestingly, this Kalayavana, this demon was stuffed inside a cupboard and so on. There are so many other interesting stories around that. In fact, that demon was actually an incarnation of Abhimanyu only. And the only weakness, so he was a very, you can say, a very strong person, though he had the soul of a demon and so on. But his only problem was, when he got stuck in the Chakravyu, the point is, he had only half knowledge of Chakravyu. So Abhimanyu's character teaches that half knowledge of anything is very, very dangerous. That's why the Chakravyu was in fact launched to kill Abhimanyu, because that was the only way in which he could attain moksha. So that's the reason why Bhagavan never imparts the knowledge of how to come out of the Chakravyu to him. How you get inside is fine, but how to come out of that, Bhagavan never imparted that knowledge to him, because ultimately he had to die in some another manner like that Daitya, Kalayavana. Next, when we talk about Bhishma Pitamaha, okay, now when we talk about Bhishmacharya, now we know the story of Bhishmacharya, who was born as Devavrata. Father was Shantanu, who goes on a hunt. He falls in love with a fisherwoman Satyavati, and that's how Satyavati's father had given a condition that only if Satyavati's sons become the next kings, then I will allow you to marry her. That's how Shantanu, he returns back to his kingdom, because he already had a son called Devavrata. That's when Devavrata, when he gets to see his father in this state, he goes to Satyavati and convinces her and her father that I will never marry. But still, Satyavati was not satisfied, and she says that there is no guarantee at all that this will happen. You can change your mind anytime. And that's when Devavrata, he takes a very great sankalpam that I will never ever marry, so that the problem only will not come. That Satyavati had a problem. Even though you will not claim, if your sons claim, then what to do? That's the reason Bhishmacharya, as Devavrata, he makes a very Bhishma sankalpam. That is, Bhishma is actually terrible. So he makes a very terrible sankalpam that I will never ever marry nor get in touch with anyone. So there is no problem of begetting children also. So nothing will happen. So that's how Devavrata, because of this great sankalpam that is there, great pratigna, the Devavrata name itself changes into Bhishmacharya. Next, when we talk about Karna we know was a great warrior, again a great archer. In fact, once he was practicing a shot, it's called the Shabda Bhedi, and that is just by listening to the sound you can you attack with an arrow. That's when a cow was there and he mistook that cow to be a wild animal, and that's how he shoots the arrow and kills it. That's when that cow actually belonged to a brahmana. He ends up cursing, saying that you will be killed by your enemy when the attention is diverted. So when your attention is diverted, you will be killed by your enemy. That's how it happens later, that when the chariot wheel of Karna was stuck in mud, he was shot by Arjuna. So where all this happened is, it happened in Mahendra Parvatam, wherein he was practicing archery with his bow, which was called as Vijaya, and he slew the cow of that Brahmana who was performing the Agnihotram and other karmas. In fact, then Karna later he tells the Brahmana the reason, and he apologizes also, but still Brahmana ends up cursing that your chariot wheel would be swallowed by mud during the Yuddham, and that's when your head will be cut off by the warrior whom you always feel that you will challenge, you should be against him and so on. That was none but Arjuna. So that's how things actually materialize. Now Mahabharatam that is there was not just a fight between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. In fact, it is said that it is something which we call popularly as the Dharma Yuddham. There are certain researches which tell that Mahabharata, this Yuddham that is there, when we talk about world war, this and that, the Greek war, Rome war, in fact in the Mahabharata Yuddham also it is said that some forces from Rome and Greek also were a part of it then. Of course, there are certain, you can say, ups and downs in it, but there are certain researches which talk about this, that even people from other places also had come and fight this Yuddham. That's why it had widespread destruction that is there. Everything, even the survival of humanity was questioned, it seems. Of course, it was so many years back. So that's why during this time, I think I would have told you this before also, the male ratio that was there of population had totally gone down because of the mass destruction that had come in. There were only majorly females, it seems, in the society in those times, because everyone has destroyed. Every soldier, every father, every brother, every man in the house has been destroyed, has been killed due to this war. So the world itself had changed, it seemed, for a certain period of time, and it took many years for males again to be born in the society. So it is not just a mere Yuddham that is there, mass destruction took place. Now Abhimanyu, when we talk about Abhimanyu, it is said that Abhimanyu was actually the son-in-law of Balarama. How come? Abhimanyu had a wife called Vatsala, and she was a daughter of Balarama. Now Balarama actually wanted Vatsala to marry Lakshmana. Now Lakshmana was Duryodhana's son. But Abhimanyu and Vatsala, they both loved each other, they wanted to get married, and that's when Abhimanyu, he took the help of his brother Ghatotkacha, Bhima's son. And Ghatotkacha, very, very interesting thing again, Ghatotkacha, he knew a little bit of magic tricks and so on. So somehow, while the marriage was there, the marriage was already set up between Duryodhana's son Lakshmana and Balarama's daughter Vatsala. Ghatotkacha goes there, does some magic and so on, and he terrifies the groom, it seems. He runs away from there. And that's how he takes away Vatsala with him, and that's how goes to his brother Abhimanyu. Both of them get married. Lakshmana actually gets upset with this, and he takes a sankalpam that he will not get married at all. And this was one more reason why Duryodhana was full of anger. And that's how Abhimanyu becomes the son-in-law of Balarama. Further, there were certain arrows which the Pandavas, which were used to attack the Pandavas. Now Bhishma, he was on the side of the Kauravas, right? And Duryodhana, though Bhishmacharya had supported the Kauravas right from the beginning, Duryodhana had certain problems, and he used to tell Bhishma that intentionally, on purpose, you are not doing any harm to the Pandavas, in fact you are favoring them and so on. And Bhishmacharya, he got so angry on this that he took 5 gold arrows, it seems, a lot of mantras and everything he chanted, and he vowed, he took a sankalpam that all the Pandavas would die before sunrise, before sunset today. And the next day what happened is, Duryodhana in fact suspected, he made a suspicion that Bhishmacharya will never do such things to the Pandavas. So he took all the arrows with him, it seems. And at that time what happens is, so basically, though the 5 arrows were prayed by Bhishmacharya and kept with him, but Duryodhana feels that though Bhishmacharya has prayed, he might never do anything with those arrows. So sneakily what he does is, the previous day he goes and he takes the arrows, keeps it with him. Bhagavan is there to rescue. He reminds Arjuna that Duryodhana had previously promised Arjuna of a boon, it seems, and in that boon you ask for those 5 golden arrows. Arjuna immediately at the right time asked for those arrows. Duryodhana was shocked. He did not even know that how he came to know about these arrows. Arjuna just had 2 shabdam, just 2 words for that, Bhagavan Krishna. So Bhagavan at the right time steps in and guides. So whenever, for us also, when we are stuck in some situations, if some thought comes in to be on the right path, that is nothing but Bhagavat Sankalpam. Further, after Yudhishthira was made the king of Hastinapuram, that is after the war, everything was over, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, they retired in fact to the forest, and mainly the reason for this was Bhima used to taunt them, saying how your sons were killed because of their wicked deeds and so on. And these mockings that were there, they actually made guilty and insecure, because even the people also in Hastinapuram had blamed both Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, it seems, for not doing much to prevent the war and so on. Further, when we talk about the Vastraharanam of Draupadi, in fact, though we all know that Duryodhana was the one who instigated Dushasana to do it and so on, it is said that Karna was actually the one behind it, because he was the one who had given this idea, it is said. In fact, Duryodhana was totally quiet when this entire episode was there, except when Draupadi had come to the court. However, usually we see the picture of Duryodhana and Dushasana who get the blame for this incident, but there are certain perceptions which say that it was actually instigated by Karna. So when Karna feels later that, oh no, I have not done anything wrong and so on, there have been many reasons wherein a lot of things which he had done, like this one thing wherein he was the one who had instigated Duryodhana to take this action. Next is, while Abhimanyu was being killed by getting caught in the Chakravyuham, now we know there were 7 Maharathis who are actually the main reason for Abhimanyu's death. It is said that this is not the complete truth. In fact, Abhimanyu was actually killed by one of the 7 Maharathis. Maharathis is nothing but 7 warriors who had expertise in killing people who are stuck inside this Chakravyuham. It was actually Duryodhana's son only. And getting angry at this, Dushasana's son, called Dharamsana actually, he was the one who ended up killing Abhimanyu, it seems. Now, why this is told is, Abhimanyu had killed one of Duryodhana's sons, and that's how Dushasana's son, by getting angry, he kills Abhimanyu. So that is, many times what happens is, in our own family structure only, if you see each other's sons, or we get into plots, right, with our close people, this is one more example of that. Now, in Kuru Yuddham, it seems that there have been lot of yuddhas that have taken place. In fact, today we know one about this Mahabharata Yuddham, which we call as a Kurukshetra Yuddham, but apart from that, Kurukshetram is a place which is named after King Kuru, who was actually the ancestor of the Kauravas and Pandavas. Though the Mahabharata Yuddham was fought on this land, it is not the first Yuddham. There have been many other Yuddhas also. Now, today's place of this Kurukshetram lies very much near to today's Delhi, that is there. And that's how you have Indraprastha and so on, such places which are there in Delhi even today. In fact, there was a war between Bhishma and Parshurama, which was fought year earlier, but of course they could not defeat each other. So, because Bhishmacharya was such a great warrior that even an avatara of Vishnu, Parshurama also could not defeat him. So, Mahabharatam is not the first Yuddham that has taken place in this Kuru Bhumi. There was a Yuddham which has taken place between Bhishmacharya and Parshurama. Next, Pandu, the father of the Pandavas, he always wished that his sons must eat his flesh, it seems, post death. Because he believed that, now the reason for this is, now in those times, there were many such things that were followed. He believed that all the knowledge that he had will get transferred to him, which he had collected in so many years, if his sons end up consuming flesh. Only Sahadeva ate a piece, it seems, and that's the reason we know that he could predict the future and so on, but he was also stopped by Bhagavan. So he was a blessed astrologer and he was able to see future. So such things that are told is Bhagavan comes to guide at the right time, though we cannot comment on this, these things are correct, wrong and so on. Everyone has their own way of thinking. But Bhagavan comes and stops him at the right time. Apart from Draupadi, we know Arjuna had more wives, Ulupi, Subhadra, and also Chitragandha. In fact, there came a time during the Mahabharata Yuddham, it seems that Arjuna had to break his marital ties with Draupadi, but he had 3 more wives who were there. Now, Arjuna, he is said to be one of the greatest warriors who are there, but there are certain things which are not much well known. In fact, many of Bhagavan's wives, many of Krishna's wives, they were in fact robbed, it seems. They were abducted or so by few robbers, especially in today's Punjab region, as is being described in the Mahabharata only. And this happened after Krishna Avataram comes to an end. So Arjuna, Krishna is his Sakha, Bhagavan, everyone, so he goes and he wants to protect Krishna's wives. But at that time what happened is, he could not do anything, it seems. His bow felt very, very heavy. The mantras that he had learned, he could not recollect all that. In fact, what happens is, at this time, before he could attack, he could not actually attack. At that time what happened is, the 8 Ashtamahishis of Bhagavan, they decided to end their lives. Others were being seized by all these robbers and so on. So when such a great calamity came in, a great warrior like Arjuna also could not do anything. Of course, these were things which were meant to happen, because Krishna Avataram had come to an end, so the other wives of Krishna also had to go back to their respective realms, Vaikuntham and so on. So therefore Arjuna could not do anything here. So the point is, this incident, what it tries to say is, many times we feel, right, everything I could do, everything is there in my hand, but at that time I am not able to do it. So Arjuna, also being a great warrior, at that minute he could not raise his bow at all. So though we might have anything, but even if a leaf has to move from here and there, that is also Bhagavat Sankalpam. Without that we cannot do anything. This is one best example for that. 2-3 more things if I have to recollect. Bhima's son, there was a son of Bhima apart from Ghatotkacha called Sarvaga. Now Bhima had another wife apart from Hidimbi and Draupadi, Balandhara. Now that Sarvaga, the son, he was not given the throne, though he was much elder than Parikshit, still he had not been given the throne. He later became the ruler of Kashirajam, which was the land of his mother Balandhara. Now the same thing happened with his uncle also, who was denied the throne. His uncle meaning Dhritarashtra. So Bhima's son was also not given the throne. In fact, Bhima's uncle, that is Dhritarashtra, also was not given the throne. Of course, that was due to his blindness and so on. So therefore, history, many times it repeats itself. This is one example for what was that. For that. Now, Ekalavya, the famous character from Mahabharatam, who was not taught by Dronacharya, because he belonged to a tribal community. In fact, he was a tribal prince of the Magadha region, and the father of Ekalavya was Hiranyadhanus, Vyatraja. We call him as Vyatraja Hiranyadhanus. He was a leader of a tribe, and he was actually the biological son of Devashrava. Who is Devashrava? He is a brother of Vasudeva. So actually Ekalavya is a cousin of Krishna Bhagavan. Now in fact, this Devashrava, who is the father of Devashrava's son. Devashrava is a brother of Vasudeva. He had a son who is the father of Ekalavya. He got lost in the forest. That was how he was found by a Nishadha called Hiranyadhanu, and he became the tribal prince. He belonged to the tribal community and so on. In fact, Ekalavya, he died while he was protecting his father during Rukmini Swayamvaram. He was killed by Krishna only, and Krishna, he blessed Ekalavya that he would soon be reincarnated and he can take revenge on Dronacharya. And this person, Ekalavya, was reincarnated, reborn as Drishtadyumna, who killed Arjuna. Now, in another aspect, it is said that once Duryodhana, while he had gone to the forest also, a Dvaita forest, the name of the forest was Dvaita forest, where he wanted to actually humiliate and insult the Pandavas, that's when Gandharva had come there, Chitrasena and all the Apsaras, they were all enjoying there. That's when Duryodhana, he asks Chitrasena that you please leave this pool and go. But he refuses. That's when a great argument takes place between Chitrasena and Duryodhana. The Pandavas were nearby. They thought for their brother and they asked Chitrasena to leave Duryodhana alone. But Chitrasena was a friend of Arjuna, so he spares Duryodhana, but he punishes him. He ties him with horse, makes him sit on a horse, ties him with lot of creepers, this and that, and so on. So though Duryodhana was humiliated, this was the first and last instance maybe where Duryodhana actually thanked Arjuna for saving his life, and tells him that what you want in return, you can ask me a boon. That's when Arjuna tells, I don't want anything now, I'll ask you later. That's how those 5 golden bows, arrows that we saw later, which Arjuna asked during the war, that was the boon where when Arjuna asked that to Duryodhana. So this was the instance. Next is the chariot of Krishna. Now the Krishna, he rode a chariot, that is Arjuna's chariot basically, which was very, very heavy. And once the yuddham was done, Krishna tells him that you get off this chariot and you just keep it away. And as soon as Krishna and Arjuna get off the chariot, it bursts, it seems, like a big explosion or so. And that's the reason why Bhagavan tells that you please get off this chariot. So, lot of horses also were there. Now these horses were actually owned by Krishna only. Shaiba, Sugriva, Meghapusha, Balahaka, these were all their names. So basically this chariot that was there, it was very, very heavy, and that's the reason why Bhagavan tells that you get rid of it. So, and as soon as Arjuna gets down, it actually explodes. So whenever Bhagavan guides him at the right time, otherwise Arjuna would ended up losing his life. Last one instance is Bhishma Pitamaha. He was actually cursed by Shikhandi while he was very much young. He is also called as Gangaputra. And Shikhandi had actually gone and approached Bhishmacharya to have a relationship with her, but he had rejected her, and that's how she takes a sankalpam to kill Bhishma. Bhishma could not be killed unless he put his bow down in battle, and he will not lower down his bow against anyone but a woman. That's when, because no woman was allowed to enter the battle, but Shikhandi, she was born as a woman, she was raised as the man. She comes in front of Bhishmacharya. Bhishmacharya refuses to battle with Shikhandi, and Arjuna uses this situation. He shoots 100 arrows or so to the ground, as there was no other way that Bhishma Pitamaha could be killed, because Bhishma Pitamaha had the boon of Ichamrityu. He could choose his death. Finally, the game of Chausar, that is the game of dice that we have, which is the base of Mahabharatam. It is a misunderstanding that it had a main role in Mahabharatam because it was a game of chance, luck and so on. In fact, it is a game of strategy. And Shakuni, the uncle of Mama of Duryodhana, has got a very, very important role for this. He was the master of the game. Nobody could defeat him. And this was the main reasons of the Mahabharata Yuddham. Of course, lot of stories, not only Mahabharatam, many kings were also playing this game, in fact passed on from one generation to the next. In fact, there were few other kings also who had been trained. In fact, they had trained 2 mice, it seems, mouse, rat, called Sundri and Mundri. Very, very interesting aspect. And in fact, these 2 mice also were trained in this game, so that the king would distract his opponents this way, it seems, by telling all such stories, by telling those mice to play that games and so on. In fact, he would just casually utter Sundri Mundri, and at that time the mice would come, they will just move the pieces around without the opponent even looking at that, it seems. So these were all, like 2 kings were playing. Suddenly that king will call his 2 mice there, they will just come from somewhere, they will just move about. What the opponent will think is, oh, just mice have come, like their nature, they'll just put down things. But it is not actually so. Very tactfully, those mice used to pick out those coins, it seems. So like this, there are many, many aspects of the Mahabharata. Whatever little I could recollect and find out, I shared with you.